Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Have you ever thought, like, maybe all those classic books we hear about don't tell the whole story? Like, what if there's this secret history of literature right in front of us? Well, get ready because today we're diving into a whole world of, like, forgotten female authors, and honestly, it's way more interesting than you might think. If you love discovering hidden literary gems, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. So we're exploring Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. You can find a link in the description. Ronnie takes us through these women authors that Jane Austen actually read and admired.
And, they even influenced her writing.
But here's the thing. These authors were super famous back then, but they kind of like van in it. We're going to try to figure out their stories, look at their books, and ask, like, why did everyone forget about them? And Romney, she's not just like an Austen fan. She's like a rare book expert. She spent years, like, touching first editions and discovering literary treasures.
You might even recognize her from, Pawn Stars or that documentary, The Booksellers.
Exactly. She brings a unique angle to this. It's not just about liking books. It's about, like, the whole rare book world.
What's so cool is that Rami didn't just read about these authors, in some boring journal. She actually tracked down their books, held them in her hands, and, saw how they traveled through time.
Right. It's like literary detective work.
Exactly.
And it all started with a chance encounter, right? She was doing a house call for her company, looking at this book collection, and there it was a Pride and Prejudice.
Classic.
But then another book caught her eye, Evelina by Frances Burney, a first edition.
Woo!
And this, like, random find sent her down this rabbit hole of research.
I love that rabbit hole.
That's how she found this whole group of forgotten female authors. It's crazy to think how many incredible writers are out there, but, like, nobody knows about them.
Makes you wonder what we're all missing out on.
Right, totally. So let's start with Frances Burney. Austen loved her. And Evelina. Well, that book directly influenced Northanger Abbey. Austen's family actually read Evelina out loud together.
Imagine that.
A whole family just, like, enjoying a story together.
It really shows how much people loved Burney's writing back then.
Totally. But Evelina wasn't just, like, a popular book. It was actually groundbreaking for its time. Burney didn't just focus on, romance. She went deep into the main character's thoughts and feelings.
And, her struggles and how she grew up, that was pretty daring for the 18th century. Think about it. Back then, novels, especially ones by women, they were seen as frivolous, maybe even dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah. People were afraid that novels would corrupt young minds, especially women's. Some even said that women would, refuse to get married because they'd be too busy looking for, the perfect romance.
That sounds familiar.
Right. Even today, some genres are just dismissed, especially if women like them. It's like, if women enjoy it, can it really be serious literature?
Yeah, I see that.
So Burney publishing Evelina anonymously, that was a smart move. She knew how society viewed women writers, so she, hid her identity.
At least at first.
Right.
It's amazing how a book that was, like, controversial back then could become a family favorite years later. Even Austen's family loved it.
It shows how, perceptions of art and literature change.
For sure. But even though Burney was successful and influenced Austen, she's not as famous. What do you think that is?
Well, as Austen became more popular, critics started comparing them. And often, Burney ended up looking worse. It's like Austen's brilliance, even though it's real, kind of overshadowed Burney's unique contributions.
That's sad. It shows how, like, the canon of literature can be so random. Some voices get amplified, others get lost. Okay, let's switch gears. Anne Radcliffe, she was the queen of Gothic novels. Austen was a big fan. And Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho directly inspired Northanger Abbey.
Yeah, and Radcliffe's work shows how literary movements are connected to what's happening in society. Gothic novels in the late 18th century. Well, people were fascinated with Shakespeare and this idea of the sublime.
So what?
It's like feeling awe and wonder, even terror, like when you see a huge storm or a giant mountain.
Got it.
Gothic novels played with that feeling. They had spooky settings, mysterious people, and, over-the-top emotions.
Crumbling castles, dark forests.
Exactly.
Sounds fun. And Radcliffe was a huge success. Not just good reviews, but also broke records for how much she got paid for her books.
This was a literary rock star.
Totally. But even though people loved her books, Radcliffe's work, like Burney's, got criticized. Why?
Well, Gothic romances were often seen as, not real literature, especially because women loved them. The fact that women wrote them, for women, made some critics think they were less important. Too emotional, too sensational, not intellectual enough.
Oh, that's so touching. We see it all the time. Women's writing being judged differently just because it's by a woman.
Totally. Makes you wonder what amazing books we've missed out on.
And one thing people talk about with Radcliffe? Her characters faint, like, all the time. To us, it seems a bit much, but we have to think about what it was like back then.
Oh, absolutely. These women had very little control over their lives. Society told them what to do. They couldn't choose. Powerful men controlled everything.
Yeah,
Fainting, it was like a way to resist, to show they were powerless. It was a way to escape a reality they couldn't change.
that's a really interesting way to think about it.
Right.
It's not weakness, it's like their bodies were rebelling. So we've talked about Burney, who really explored a young woman's mind, and Radcliffe, who wrote these amazing Gothic stories. But there's more on Austen's bookshelf, and there's one author who's just so witty and bold. Charlotte Lennox. Lennox was known for her, sharp humor and how she made fun of society. Get this, when her novel Harriet Stewart was coming out, Samuel Johnson, the dictionary guy,
Yeah, yeah.
he threw her this massive party that lasted all night.
He knew she was amazing.
Right, he was like, this woman is a force to be reckoned with. But Lennox's story is different. Unlike Austen, Burney, and Radcliffe, she was always struggling with money.
It's true. That really shaped her writing. She had to write what would sell, not just what she wanted.
It makes you think about all the great books we might have lost because authors couldn't afford to just, write what they wanted.
Yeah.
Lennox and Johnson were, connected. He was a huge literary figure, and he supported her work. He even contributed to her most famous novel, The Female Quixote. What do you think he saw in her writing?
I think he saw her wit, how she used satire to point out society's problems. In a way, she's like Austen, who was also funny. People didn't always get Austen's humor back then, but we do now.
Right. It's like Lennox helps make it okay for Austen to be funny and, challenge those social norms. It's like a literary torch being passed on.
That's a great way to put it.
It shows that even those genius authors, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They're inspired by others. Okay, so we've met three amazing women authors who not only lived during Austen's time, but really shaped how she wrote. But wait, there's more. Austen's bookshelf is full of hidden gems. We'll dive into even more forgotten voices in part 2. But before we go, I want to hear what you think. What surprised you about these authors? What parts of their work really speak to you? Let us know in the comments, and we'll continue this journey in part 2.
It's incredible. When you really dig into the traditional, literary canon, you find so much more. There are all these forgotten voices just waiting for someone to discover them.
Yeah, each one gives us a new way to look at history and, just being human. And as we've been saying, Austen's bookshelf is full of them. We've talked about Burney, Radcliffe, and Lennox. But guess what? There are even more amazing women writers we haven't even touched on.
Like Hannah More, even Romney was a little skeptical at first, but More was huge back in her day. She wrote a lot and was really into social activism.
Oh yeah, More. I have to admit, I didn't know about her before this book. She sounds pretty cool, like someone who wasn't afraid to speak up and, fight for change.
Exactly.
Another author Romney talks about is Charlotte Smith. Her poetry was super popular, and some critics even compared her to Wordsworth and Coleridge, what made her so good.
Smith's poetry is really personal and hits you right in the feels. She wrote a lot about her own struggles, especially with money. She was a femme causaire, which sounds weird, but it meant that legally, she didn't exist as a separate person from her husband.
So she couldn't own anything, no property, no control over her own money, and she couldn't even sign a contract or anything without her husband's permission.
Exactly, and that's what makes her writing so amazing. She used it to show the world how unfair it was for women.
And it's incredible that they were talking about this stuff centuries ago, and we're still dealing with it today, right? It shows we've come a long way, but we've still got a ways to go. Okay, so Romney also talks about Elizabeth Inchbald, who went from a farmer's daughter to a successful actress and playwright. Wow, what a journey. What do you think made her want to be in the theater?
Well, Inchbald was a natural performer, and her sharp wit made her really popular in London. She wrote some really successful plays, too. She loved exploring themes of love and marriage and, how people climb the social ladder.
So many of these women were successful in creative fields, even with all those limitations society placed on them. It's like their creativity couldn't be held back.
Exactly.
Another interesting one from Austen's bookshelf is Hester Lynch Thrale Piazzi. She was close with Samuel Johnson, but her story shows that even good friendships can be messed up by societal expectations and, well, just life choices.
Yeah, Piazzi was a great writer, but people mostly remember her for her second marriage, which was super controversial. She married an Italian musician after her husband died, and everyone freaked out.
Oh, wow. Imagine being judged so harshly for just, finding love again. It's like women were expected to follow this strict script, and if they didn't, everyone looked down on them.
Totally. Piazzi's story shows how different the rules were for men and women, especially when it came to romance and, just being themselves.
She was brave to break the mold, even if it meant being ostracized.
Absolutely.
And finally, we have Maria Edgeworth. She was like a literary superstar when Austen was growing up. Austen was a huge fan, You can see how Edgeworth's wit and social commentary might have rubbed off on her.
Edgeworth was amazing at social satire. She used her novels to show how ridiculous and hypocritical society could be. She wrote about class, gender, relationships, the whole shebang.
It's fascinating how so many of these women use their writing to talk about social issues and fight for change. It reminds us that literature can be really powerful even if those voices are silenced or pushed aside at first.
And thanks to scholars and, book lovers, those voices are starting to be heard again.
Right.
The internet has been a game changer, making it so much easier to find the work of these amazing authors.
It's like this whole new world of literature has opened up to us.
Exactly.
And it's way more diverse and complex than we ever thought. Makes me wonder what else is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, absolutely.
But as Romney dives deeper into their stories, she starts questioning, the whole idea of a literary canon. What made her doubt it?
She started thinking that maybe these women were forgotten, not because their writing wasn't good, but because people were biased against women writers. That literary canon we always hear about, it's supposed to be like the best of the best, but maybe it's not so objective after all.
So you're saying it wasn't that these women weren't good writers, the system was just rigged against them from the start.
Exactly.
Wow.
And luckily, feminist scholars have been working hard to change that and bring these forgotten voices back. They're showing us that there's more to literature than just the traditional canon. It's about finding those alternative stories and seeing how everything's connected.
So instead of focusing on the lone genius, they're highlighting how writers inspire each other and how important it is to recognize those who've been overlooked.
Exactly. It's not just a straight line of great men. It's more like a tapestry with all these different threads woven together. Each one is a unique voice, a perspective that adds to the conversation about art and, just being human.
That's a beautiful image. It reminds us that the story of literature is always changing and that we all play a part in shaping it. And one really inspiring example is Dale Spender's Pandora Press. They focused on reprinting books by women, and that made a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So the big question is, did we accomplish our mission with this deep dive? Did we bring those authors back into the spotlight?
Well, it's a process, right? Every time someone reads their books, talks about them, or a new edition is published, it helps. And that's where you come in, dear listener.
Okay, so what are the key takeaways here? What should our listeners be thinking about?
Remember that literary canon isn't set in stone. It changes. And society, culture, even money play a role in that.
So we shouldn't just accept the traditional stories about literature. We should question them, look deeper, and find those different perspectives.
Yes, exactly. And don't believe that stuff about literary history just being about great men. Find the hidden voices, the forgotten stories, those alternative points of view.
It's about understanding that there are many ways to be great in literature, and that you can find brilliance in the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to try something new. Step outside your comfort zone, read different genres, discover new authors.
I love that. Be a literary explorer.
Exactly.
This has been an amazing journey. We've uncovered hidden histories, questioned what we thought we knew, and rediscovered the power of women's voices in literature. I'm ready to hit the bookstore.
That's the beauty of literature, isn't it? It's a never-ending adventure. So keep reading, keep questioning, and keep discovering.
We've got more to explore in part 3. It's really amazing, how looking at these women authors that nobody reads anymore has totally changed how I see Jane Austen and her place in literature. It's like we're seeing all the things that inspired her.
It just shows that even the most famous authors, they don't come out of nowhere. They're part of a bigger picture, ideas and influences that go way back.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jane Austen's bookshelf, I think the big question is, are there other forgotten authors out there? What other literary treasures haven't we found yet?
That's something to think about, right? We've always been told this one story about literary history, but it's left out so many voices. It's up to us to change that narrative, dig a little deeper, and find those hidden stories.
It's like we have this map, and now it's our turn to go on an adventure. But where do we start? How do we, as readers, actually find those lost authors?
Well, first, be open to looking beyond the usual books everyone talks about. Don't be scared to try something new. Pick up a book by someone you've never heard of. Explore different genres, different time periods. You never know what you'll find.
Love that. Be a literary explorer, right?
Exactly. And another thing, support those groups that are trying to bring back the work of these forgotten authors. There are tons of organizations, publishers, even just people who are dedicated to this. Even a small donation or just talking about it on social media can make a difference.
Yeah, we can all be literary activists, fighting for books that deserve to be read.
Exactly. And lastly, share what you find with others. Talk about the books you're reading, tell your friends, write reviews, start conversations about the authors and stories that have, really touched you. The more we talk about them, the more people will want to read them.
It's like a chain reaction, right? One person's excitement to make someone else curious, and suddenly, these forgotten authors are back in the spotlight.
That's right. And don't forget, the best discoveries are often the ones we least expect. So stay curious, and who knows, you might find something amazing.
This deep dive has been such a journey. We've uncovered all these hidden histories, challenged what we thought we knew, and rediscovered how powerful women of voices are in literature. I'm seriously ready to head to the bookstore right now.
That's the beauty of literature, right? It's always an adventure exploring new ideas and ways of seeing the world. Keep reading, keep asking questions, and keep discovering.
Huge thanks to everyone for joining us on this incredible deep dive into Jane Austen's bookshelf. We want to hear from you. Which author are you most excited to read? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into amazing books and ideas. Happy reading.